In this lesson, we're going to look at how we can create some of the different effects that we can create in a Photoshop or other digital photo editor file in CSS. I have this Photoshop file, which if we scroll down here, you'll see this is kind of a subtle gradient. This is a more extreme gradient. I've got sort of a radial gradient. I've got some drop shadows. I've got an inner shadow. I've got a background pattern. And then we'll also talk about making custom background patterns, which is a great technique that you might want to use in your projects. Okay, so I've got this file here, and then I also have the same thing in HTML and CSS without all the stuff. So basically, we're going to make this page that I already have the start of, and I've given you the start files for. We're going to make it look like that Photoshop file, ideally as closely as we possibly can. That's pretty cool to be able to do that, make that look like this here. Okay, so how do we do that? What we're going to do is we're going to start with looking at the gradients. And by the way, if you don't happen to have Photoshop, you can also use this Photopea application here. That file open, let me open this other file. Desktop, it's this. Where'd it go? Background text, open there. There it is. So here we have the exact same file open here in Photopea. So you can actually do the same stuff right here. You'll notice that I have labels in their own folder. Over here, I have the individual elements on the page with a gradient effect on them. And we can open that up by clicking on this thing and actually seeing what the gradient is here in Photopea. I'm going to go back and do the same thing in Photoshop here. So in Photoshop, I can see what this gradient is by coming over here, and same thing, I can just double click on this gradient overlay here to sort of see what this gradient looks like here. And if I click on it, I can get the stop ends of the gradient, and I can double click on those to figure out what that color is. These stop ends here have to do with opacities. So it's set to 100% and 100% on each side, but you could change the opacity. You could have it go from a 100% opaque to, somewhat less than 100% opaque on the other end, but this one's set to be 100% opaque. So how do we get this kind of thing in CSS? Well, there are a number of tools out there for creating gradients in CSS. A lot of them are web tools that are pretty easy to use. And we'll take a look at a few of those. The actual syntax for making CSS gradients is not very friendly to write by hand, so it's really helpful to have a tool to do this. So over here, I've got two of them up here. One of them's this one here, and you can move this thing around for middle, you can add more stops, you can take these off by pressing clicking on this and pressing delete to get rid of them. And you can come in here and you can set whatever you want for stops in here, for however you want it to go, to create the gradient you want to create. You can put them on different angles. You can do all of this kind of stuff right here. And in here, and then down here, it's actually generating the CSS you need to create that gradient. So we want to create the gradient that we have for our first box there. So the way to do that is to go back to either Photoshop or that Photopea, and then you come in here, or Photopea or Photopea, I don't know how it's supposed to be pronounced, but come in here and get the actual color. So I'm going to copy that color on one end, and that color is going to be on the top end there. So I'm going to come back to Chrome here, and I can see this is the top end. Actually, I'm going to this around so that it's, let's say, 0 degrees, like that. That's the top end down there. So I'm going to put that color in there. So there's the top end. And then I go back to Photoshop. And once again, go into the gradient overlay. Click on this and get the bottom end. Now, if this was off center, I mean, you can do other things with this to see what that's like, and you can mimic the same settings over here in the gradient generator, this one here, one we're using at the moment. Make sure you pay attention to the pound signs, because you have to have the pound signs here, but Photoshop doesn't include them. So there we go. So there's our gradient. And this is a fallback. So if for some reason you have a browser that doesn't support gradients, this is something that's been supported for many, many years now. You'd have to be using kind of an old version of Internet Explorer, I think, for this to not be supported. But so that's been supported for a long time. But we can just take that and copy it, and then we can come back to Visual Studio Code. And over here, you can see I've got div ID box 1. That's creating that first box on the page. If we go to the style sheet over here, you can see I have a basic rule for the divs there, but I can make a rule that says hashtag or pound box 1. And I can just paste that stuff right in there. Maybe click in front of it and press tab. There we go. Save that. And then come back and look at the page. Refresh and look at that. So now we have a gradient on the page that matches the one that we have on our Photoshop file.